Despite the lopsided nature of the contest, last night's Super Bowl was the most watched in history. A record 111.5 million Americans tuned in to watch the Seattle Seahawks obliterate the Denver Broncos. Prior to Sunday's big game, President Obama sat down with Fox News' Bill O'Reilly, something he also did in 2011, the last time Fox broadcast the Super Bowl. Back then, the talk focused on Egypt, healthcare, and the president's football fluency.
But are you actually going to watch the game?
Of course I watch the game.
You're going to sit down and you're going to watch it.
I'm not
you know football, you know, like blitzes and coverage and all that? You know
No,
all
I know
that?
football, man.
In yesterday's interview, O'Reilly charged out of the gate and addressed three of the topics that most fascinate Bill O'Reilly: Obamacare, the IRS, and Benghazi.
Was it the biggest mistake of your presidency to tell the nation over and over, if you like your insurance, you can keep your insurance?
Oh, Bill, you've got a long list of my mistakes in my presidency.
No, really. What some people are saying is that the IRS was used.
Yeah.
We still don't know what happened there.
Bill, we do. That's not what happened. Folks have, again, had multiple hearings on this. I mean, these kinds of things keep on surfacing, in part because you and your TV station will promote them.
Your detractors believe that you did not tell the world it was a terror attack because your campaign didn't want that out.
Bill, think
That's
about
what they believe.
And they believe it because folks like you are telling them that.
Fox promises more interview footage tonight, but for the Super Bowl audience, there was nothing on the economy or on immigration or on the budget or on foreign policy or the war or not even any of the jobs numbers. Writing in The Hill this morning, Fox contributor Juan Williams noted the Republican fixation on Benghazi has less to do with the facts of the tragedy than with their assessment that it is their best and only remaining hope to derail Hillary Clinton's chances of winning the White House. One person would seem to agree with that. In a third-quarter tweet, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton summed up the state of play in both politics and in football. It is so much more fun to watch Fox when it's someone else being blitzed and sacked. Joining me now is Washington Post columnist Jonathan Capehart and political editor and White House correspondent at the Huffington Post, Sam Stein. Sam, the president said in that very interview there was not even a smidgen of corruption. But Politico reports that the Republican Party does not need a smoking gun and that the congressional Republicans are trying to rekindle the IRS Tea Party targeting controversy as the 2014 election heats up. Mitch McConnell says he's just getting started. So basically, is it that we can look forward to this forever, this scandal, not non-scandal scandal?
The scandals that won't go away?
Yeah.
It certainly feels that way. You know, I don't begrudge Bill O'Reilly for asking the questions that he did. I'm not in the media criticism game necessarily, but I do find it odd that he didn't have the full plate of facts in front of him, especially with respect to the IRS scandal. It's not like there hasn't been a dearth of reporting on this. People have looked into this a lot. They've asked questions about why Tea Party groups found their names on the Be on the Lookout list, the BOLO lists, and they've come to the conclusion that it was a bureaucratic bumbling. People got ahead of themselves. They did things that were wrong, but that there really wasn't a nefarious plot here orchestrated by the White House. And one thing that I will note, and of course things can change, more investigations might produce more things, so we have to keep that in line. But one thing that Bill O'Reilly said last night was that, well, this guy, Doug Shulman, who headed the IRS, visited the White House 157 times. How could you say that it wasn't orchestrated by the White House? That has been discussed a lot, too, and it turns out that Shulman was there because he was part of the implementation process for the healthcare law. And so if Bill O'Reilly is going to go in guns a-blazing on these questions, which is entirely in his right, he should probably have the full facts, and that was where I thought the interview sort of went off the rails.
Well, but that's also the question, right, Jonathan, is whether whether O'Reilly was actually listening to the president's answers or has accepted any of the facts that have been reported on the IRS. And I thought this was a really fascinating, it was actually a side, it wasn't in the published interview, but when the president sat down with David Remnick in the New Yorker, he talked about the problem he has penetrating certain parts of the Republican Party, and I'll read the exact quotes. He writes, "The issue has been the inability of my message to penetrate the Republican base so that they feel persuaded that I'm not the caricature that you see on Fox News or Rush Limbaugh. As long as there's that gap between perceptions of me within the average Republican primary voter and the reality, it's hard for folks like John Boehner to move too far in my direction." I thought that was a fairly self-effacing quote insofar as it lays some of the onus on the president's shoulders. I wonder whether he can and will ever penetrate that part of the base.
Well, as we saw with the clips of the O'Reilly interview that you showed, no, he'll never penetrate the base, the Republican Party base, with, visions of who he really is. And, he even said as much to Bill O'Reilly. The reason Benghazi, IRS, problems with the healthcare.gov site, the reason why these things keep coming up, especially Benghazi, is because people like Bill O'Reilly and Fox News keep talking about it. And we know why they talk about it, because it's something that works with Bill O'Reilly's audience, but it also works with the Republican Party base. They are fixated, dare say obsessed, with particularly those three issues, but especially Benghazi. And when I went down to North Carolina to talk to people about the impending implementation of the Affordable Care Act, I ran into David Jackson, who talked about every conspiracy theory under the sun related to the president, and there's only one place where he could have those views fortified.
Stam, one wonders what the White House could do, if not to neutralize the issue and sort of settle the argument, if there is a legitimate one, over the IRS, if not for this presidency, then for 2016, because a lot of people think that this is really what we saw last night was the telegraphing of Republican talking points for the 2016 race, which is the ACA, Benghazi, and the IRS. And I know you tweeted about this before. There is a DOJ, Department of Justice investigation on this IRS stuff. I think it is important to have some sort of branch of government take this on if the reporting isn't enough. But you pointed out that there is an Obama donor involved in Attorney Barbara Boserman is going to be investigating some of this IRS stuff. One wonders why the administration or the Justice Department would do that, given how that opens up the investigation to cries of manipulation.
Well, they do it because you don't want to pick people to investigate stuff based on their political affiliations, and it works both ways. But it's a slippery slope. You have to give someone the benefit of doubt that they will act independently. But it does lend credence to the Republican criticisms of the DOJ handling of this, and it sort of serves the paranoia about a massive cover-up. But to the broader question of what the administration can do, think back to when Obama took office. One of the first things he did when he took office as president in 2009 was he held a meeting with conservative columnists at George Will's house. And it was part of a charm offensive that the administration thought they could do to win over some of their obvious critics. And that quickly blew up in their face. It was shortly thereafter that the White House also launched a campaign against Fox News for what they thought was unfair coverage. So this has been an ongoing problem from the beginning. And I think they're really exhausted in terms of how to deal with it. And it basically, surrendered to the idea that they will have a faction of this country informed predominantly by Republican media that will be forever against them.
Jonathan, I wonder what you make of Hillary Clinton's tweet last night, because on one hand, it was, I think, one could interpret that as her taking the aggressive offense position with relating to Fox, even as it was, she positions herself as on D, getting blocked, blitzed, and sacked. How much do you think this is, as Michael Tomasky says? This interview told me that Fox has already basically forgotten about Obama and is sweating bullets looking at the next President Clinton being in office until 2024, because these are three issues that we can all probably agree will most certainly be litigated in the next election cycle.
Well, it appears that the Republican Party base is now fighting a two-front war. They'll never stop fighting against President Obama. But yes, ever since Benghazi exploded on the scene, they've been gunning for not only the president, but also then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton for that very reason, to sort of muddy her up in anticipation for a presidential run. And so if you're Hillary Clinton, who's now out of politics and sitting at home and giving speeches and helping to run your family's foundation, why not send a little, tweak via Twitter?
Tweet zingers.
Yeah, why not? It doesn't hurt her in any respect. And this gives us something more to talk about.
And indeed it has. I thank you, my friends, Washington Post Jonathan Capehart and the Huffington Post Sam Stein. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Alex.
Coming up, Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan stars in a Super Bowl ad calling on Americans to, quote, let Asia assemble your phone. Turns out Asia, which is not a country, might be up to just a few other things. That's next.